Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar. The topic for today's uLaw webinar is getting ready for your Law Society audit. Okay, so you can kindly use this particular title and log 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits presented to you in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. I believe the process is to log into your individual Law Society portals, type this particular title, and you would be granted the 1 hour of CPD credits. Okay, it's an interesting topic, as one of the members had mentioned in the chat window as well. It's one of the topics that we often talk to our clients, often talk to anyone who is in the process, who has just started their business. This is one of the first things that they look forward to, or probably not. They certainly know that within the first 12 to 18 months of starting a legal practice, that the Law Society would certainly be looking to do an audit. And we certainly want to try and demystify what this process looks like, what you can do as a legal professional and as a business professional to be prepared and ready for these audits. Because if you know what to expect, you pretty much can prepare yourself for how best you can be ready for what's to come. And the subtle disciplines and the subtle things that you do on a day-to-day basis so that you're audit ready right from day one. Right? So it's like anything else. It's a certain stretch of the fitness. So like you have your physical fitness, your mental fitness. This is really your audit fitness. And as long as you're working at it on a daily basis, when you're actually put to the test, you certainly would react and come out with flying colors, especially if you're doing it in a consistent manner. Okay, so think of it from that perspective. It's a certain discipline and working towards certain best practices that you would almost make part of your day-to-day activities so that you're ready for this audit right from day one. Like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a specific agenda, and it is to talk about the audit process, the specifics of what is expected for this audit, how you as a legal firm can best prepare yourself for that audit. And we've broken it down. We've used the references provided by the Law Society, primarily here in the province of Ontario, but also reviewed the other provinces in the country to look at what is expected, the major categories of expectations from these audits. And we have broken it down to 4 categories that we think are really overarching and is more of an umbrella, everything else coming under that. Starting with the practice review, so really looking at policies, procedures, methodologies. Financial review, that's really the black and white of your books in regards to your trust, your general accounts, and the ledgers and journals, the reconciliation documents. And these are some of the most dreaded components or data components, mostly in an audit, because of course the Law Society auditors are very specific, and I would really not use the word strict, but something close to being strict about how best they view those numbers and ensuring that there's no misappropriation, malpractice, and things of that nature. So there's a lot of, I would say, importance, if you will, given to the financial review. And as you could see, a lot of the provincial and the procedural documentation may be sometimes asked for as well. For example, the Form 9A in the province of Ontario. Then comes a technology review, and this is more of a best practice checklist, ensuring that you as a legal firm representing the society, the Law Society rather, has everything that you possibly can and all the information that you possibly have to run a professionally run business. So ensuring that, for example, how do you ensure quality of backup, especially if you're dealing with certain types of process and procedures to store and retain client data. So the question mostly comes, what kind of backup procedures do you have to ensure that the client data is safeguarded, is not lost? If your laptop crashes, does it go along with it? Do you have a backup in another system? If it's a cloud-based system, have you ensured that you looked at the terms and conditions of where this data is stored? Is it leaving the soil, the Canadian soil? Things of that nature, right? And of course, if you're into a larger law firm where many different individuals are involved, there's also the concept of MDM, which is mobile data management. Are you allowing people to access information over the cloud across devices? Do they download information on their mobile devices? Things of that nature. Okay. Then comes the professional rules of conduct. It's really ensuring that you've done all the due diligence to make sure that you're a stand-up professional, a law firm that can be well represented, including things of today. How best are you doing to make sure that you have your CPDs up to date, right? Many of those other things that are expected outside of just the financial and the practice management components of running a legal firm. And last but not the least, we'll try and put a wrapper around how modern software tools and technologies enhance the capability and the capacity of a law firm or a legal firm to be able to run all of these things in parallel, being able to run all of these in a very seamless and lesser time compared to doing this on a manual basis, for example. Okay, that's just a little caveat for the end. Before I can get started, just a few housekeeping. If you can kindly use the chat window provided to ask any questions that you may have at any time. Either myself or my support staff on the call would be more than happy to answer it. We'd greatly appreciate it if it could be specific to today's topic, which is around getting ready for Law Society audits. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you on our YouTube channel as early as Monday next week. Okay. So moving forward, almost the first slide, we really talk about what is this audit and what is its purpose. So if you can really appreciate why it's being done, it might actually motivate you to do this right from day one. In learning, reading, and really discussing this audit process with auditors as well as our clients who have actually gone through this process, come out with flying colors, what we believe is the true purpose, and it's something that's been articulated in the Law Society's bookkeeping guidelines as well, is that the audit process is really meant to help and support a high-quality record keeping within a legal or a law firm. Okay, that's the primary purpose, is some centralized body that can help you through this process and support you through this process of promoting a high-quality record keeping within a legal firm. Okay, and how they plan to accomplish this particular support is by asking a series of determined questions, mostly fact-based, predominantly fact-based, that gives you an overall picture of how best you're dealing with the important data components of your legal firm. Okay? These are structured questions. These are not random. You pretty much should know what you're getting into when you're getting audited. And, of course, the questions may vary based on, of course, your individual firm's specific needs and your situation that you're in. A very, very simple example at that would be if your firm does not have a trust account to begin with, and we've done this many times, we've spoken about this in previous webinars too, then of course you're not going to be asked the questions around trust ledgers, journals, reconciliation of trust accounts. Those questions are, of course, do not pertain to your situation. It's very simple, very straightforward, right? But if you do have both trust and general, then those questions apply. So very similarly, depending on the nature of your business and how you conduct business as a legal firm, the questions that are predetermined would alter itself and how they present it to you. All these questions have a certain, I would say, DNA of the expected answers. So for example, they expect that your reconciling on a regular basis. If you're not reconciling on a regular basis, of course, the Law Society auditor would certainly recommend that you do it, may have a follow-up session with you to make sure if you are in the groove or in the process of doing it more regularly. And if they do find certain anomalies within the reconciliation, certain transactions that you're unable to provide an answer, of course, they're going to help you with scheduling another time to give you an opportunity to explain the anomalies in those transactions. And beyond, checkups and follow-ups, if you're unable to provide it, that's when appropriate actions are then taken, which is left to the auditor based on the policies and guidelines that they go by, right? But as long as you know what they expect and you kind of pretty much can work towards giving them the right answer right from day one, then these audit processes should be a very smooth process for any legal firm. Many times, the problem really is when you leave it kind of to the last minute and you certainly don't have answers to these predetermined questions that you already should know what they were, right? And to the popular question of why me, it's, again, something that's planned for, especially if it's a newbie in the business, someone who's just started off. You can certainly expect to be audited within the first 12 to 18 months because they want to catch you early to make sure that if you are, by process, making certain subliminal mistakes that you don't realize yourself, or maybe you haven't completely understood what the bookkeeping guidelines are and what the compliance nature of these documentation that's expected is, then this is a great checkpoint for them to help you maneuver you back into the mainstream of the compliance expectations. Okay? So really we look at it being a design as a proactive compliance measurement and problem detection tool. Helps you, of course, to measure the integrity of the legal firm, its financial filing process, and assess ongoing compliance with record-keeping requirements. Okay, so that's essentially what the audit process is, the purpose, and the answer to why me. It's really not why me, it's when me, because you are going to be audited at a particular expected time. Now comes the question. That's fantastic. So we know we're going to be audited. Rather be ready right from the day one, and that's awesome. So what are we really being audited on? That's the next question. And here are, as I mentioned, a high-level subcategorization or categorization, however we like to call it, of the review components. There's a practice review, a financial review, technology review, professional and time management review. A few of these reviews, of course, are data-driven, stricter about how they look at the answers for these questions that they ask you. For some of these components, such as time management, professional, they, of course, want to understand, all right, what do you intend to do? So let's say today you don't have a practice management system, you're doing this manually, and that's leading to a little bit of a time gap or maybe leading to some inefficiencies of how you're represented. Then the question may be, all right, what are you going to do about it? What are your plans to really help you through this process, if you really will? And kind of leave it at that. And if you are being planned for another review, at that particular time, the auditor may ask you to show what you've done to improve that situation. Whereas, as I mentioned earlier, if it's a trust ledger and the numbers don't match, then the approach to how best to correct that is slightly different from whether you use a audit or practice management software or not. Okay, so the degree of scrutiny differs based on the review factors that go behind it. But if you look at the practice review, predominantly what's being asked for is how you as a legal firm or a law firm plan the appropriate documentation, process, and procedures to manage client information, the matters of the file information for these clients, and of course, leading to how best you work towards the financial transactions for these client matters. right? So do you have a retainer letter sample readily available? That's that retainer letter is it just a 2-line document, or is it an elaborate document that really talks about all of the components that are being mentioned in a bookkeeping guideline, which talks about the nature of the matter and scope of the matter, your fees for the particular matter, the responsibilities of both your firm and the client are all these documented, because if you don't have that fundamental structure in place, then what's going to happen is if you are being, let's say you have a payment and the client did not make the payment, and if you don't have a solid engagement letter, then you probably don't have a chance to use that as a proof for the agreement that was made between your firm and the client, right? So this is something that the Law Society wants you to be safeguarded. And that's why the concept of a retainer evolved, is to safeguard the interest of the legal practitioner here, because now you can take money in advance. As long as you can show the prudence behind it of how you spent the money and how you're asking or moving the money in a very transparent, prudent way, then the money is yours and it's protected, and there are no chances of a client non-paying you or not obliging to the payment that was agreed upon, right? So the practice review talks about all those components. What documentation do you have right from get-go? How do you intake the client information? Have you done your conflict checks? That's a very important first step, right? All of that is part of the practice review. When you did see a conflict, what did you do? Did you transfer the file over to another colleague, or did you just respectfully decline working with that client because of the conflict, or did you go ahead and do the file nevertheless because maybe there was a certain factor that you had looked at? If you have created matters, is it easier for you to manage these matters even if it's for the same client? How best do you manage multiple matters? If you have multiple matters, then how do you best showcase the retainers? Do you accept retainers all into one? Because sometimes if you don't have a practice management system, if you're doing this manually, it's as easy as just taking a $1,000 retainer and spreading across matters, but not knowing which amount went to which matter. So that will unfortunately trickle down to a not so well kept financial record keeping. Right? So all of this is towards that, right? And then within the matters, do you have all the procedures and policies, of course, to help you through the process? How often do you docket? How often do you disperse? How often do you invoice? Do you keep a tab on the non-payments that customers being made? Do you keep a tab on the pending trust transfers that you haven't made? Because that's going to affect your reconciliation if you've not done that in time. Because those are the types of review questions that are being asked out of practice review. Then the logical move is to move on to the financial review. So you've created a client, you've done the conflict check, you've created a matter, fantastic. You've invoiced them, you've moved the money from trust to general, you accepted payments, whatever may be the situation. Now all these transactions have actually happened in the bank too. Right? If someone paid you a check, of course you've deposited that check in real life. So it's like two lives that you're living. One is on the book itself, we're using paper, pen, or software, and the other is the real life that you live where you actually do this physically or actually do this transfer within banks. And then financial review really talks about how do you reconcile these two lives? How do you reconcile what you've written in your books with paper, pen, or software with what's actually really happened that's reflected in your bank? That's where it starts. Reconciling it, ensuring that each transaction that you've entered in the system is reflected in the bank, vice versa, and if they have not reflected, letting the Law Society know why it's the case. That's the reconciliation document. Is it an outstanding withdrawal? Is it an outstanding deposit? Was it a bank error? What happened? Right? They want to give you the benefit of the doubt, and that's why they have these components to help you answer the question saying, why is the two number not balancing? Well, because there was a bank error of $6 that happened in the last minute, which was not accounted for because it was last minute. Or had you caught that problem ahead, that's maybe something the auditors may say. If, let's say the bank error was on the 15th of the month. Unfortunately, if you're only catching that on the 28th or the 29th of the month, the auditor might then say, going forward, kindly make sure that you're actually staying on top of it or ensuring you tell the bank to take that bank fee out of your general account. And I'm sure you're going to make that correction and you move along. After you reconcile, if you're really not reconciled on a monthly basis, then that's where the problem starts. Then you have to do a lot of catch-up. You have to remember what these transactions were meant for, and that's where you're doing a lot of running around, catching up, leading to maybe some possible mistakes. So that's one thing that we all want to agree upon, is something we want to work towards. If you aren't already there, if you're there, that's fantastic. Once you've reconciled both your trust and general accounts, and of course the trust account within quotes is more important from an audit perspective. Often we talk about, the general accounts is really not something the auditors look for. Yes and no, because sometimes, yes, the trust account is very important and they 100% are going to look at it. The general account sometimes is being asked for, because if you have a reconciled general account, they may actually let you easy on, let's say, documents such as expense book, because they know that you reconciled your general account, which means that your expense book must be very much top of its game. The numbers should be right, potentially leading to a good P&L, which is not their problem, but they're again trying to help you be a good business owner, because someone else is actually going to look at that. That's the CRA. So as we said earlier, the audit is really not a fear factor. It's more of a proactive measure to help you through this process. And after you've done your reconciliation, of course, there's a lot of questions around the ledgers and journals. So for example, how did you get this retainer check? Right? Do you get it as a check? Do you get it as an email transfer? How do you move money from a trust account to a general account? If you're doing this by paying yourself, writing a check, then show us the check deposits. If you're doing this online, which is pretty much how everyone's doing it today, then show us a record keeping of that. And that's one of the document is the Form 9A in the province of Ontario. Is every time you do a trust transfer electronically from a trust account into a general account, there's a form that simply asks you for the from institution's name, address, the to institution's name, address, the purpose of this transaction, the client, matter, file, reason. That's pretty much it. So they need that for every movement of money out of the trust account. Okay. Then you have the general ledger journals, as I said, the provincial procedural documents such as Form 9A, intermatter trust transfer if you are into real estate. And this is where a lot of time is spent. And then third category, as we understand, is something that's being asked today, is the technology review, which I mentioned earlier, is how do you safeguard the sanity, the security of the client information? Do you have all of this in print? And if so, how do you ensure that you have backup copies? What happens if there's a fire in the office? What plans do you have for that? If you've lost these files, how do you manage with lost client data? If you have a system, then are you dependent on the system, or are you doing the right backups on a regular basis? If so, how often? If you're using a cloud-based system, does the cloud provider give you enough terms and conditions that you can review? Or have you reviewed those terms and conditions? Or ask them for it, which talks about the policies that govern how they use the data within the software. Do they resell the client data? Do you know about that? So for example, with uLaw, we have our terms and conditions very clear right on our website. We give it to our clients as and when they ask for it, but it's very much black and white. And there are many other providers such as us who have it very clear in the terms and conditions and the data security policy very much on their website. Ensuring that the data is, your comfort zone. The Law Society in Canada does very much talk about having the data in the Canadian soil. So where does the data reside is the next question. So those are the types of questions from a technology review that you may want to ask yourself. Are you dependent on a geographical location to access information? As such as today, In the COVID situation, of course, everyone's learned that you certainly need a bit of a remote access and are a little more warm and cozy towards cloud-based systems because it gives them that much-needed convenience because they can get to a physical location to access their device, right? And of course, the last but not the least, we spoke about professional and time management review is, are you doing everything that's necessary to maintain a high standard of professional conduct in your workplace and in the space of you being a law professional, such as the obligations that you have for CPD, etc. And how best are you using your time management tools and skills to ensure that you're top of your game, you're also spending enough time for your family so that you have a bit of a sanity in how you work towards being a successful business owner and a law society representative or professional in that law society. Okay, so we kind of have set the stage for what to expect. These are the 4 components. They're probably not going to ask you for anything outside the spectrum. It's pretty much going to be governed within these 4 major categories, right? They really don't, not sure, but many times they don't ask you for your personal financial information, right? Because that's expected. That is not something the law society is looking for. If you made a purchase for a TV for your house, unless you've written it off as a disbursement or something random and radical like that, they're really not looking for all of that information. This is pretty much what they're looking for pertaining to your business. Now, how do you prepare for this? We've spoken enough about what to expect. So if you aren't already doing this, if you're doing this, as I said, that's awesome. We have a lot of our clients and a lot of other colleagues who are not our clients who we know have fantastic, phenomenal process and discipline towards how best they take care of all of these components being ready from day one. And here are some excerpts of things that has worked, and we hope that you can take this back and give it a try. As I mentioned earlier, we don't believe that the audits were necessarily designed to scare you or your firm. It was definitely designed to help you find issues and correct them or solve them early. And then the question really comes down to if that is really the process, and we already know what questions, what timelines, what's going to be asked out of us, why not be prepared for it from day one, right? It's not an out-of-syllabus question that's being asked. It's very much within the syllabus. And for you to enable yourself to be ready from day one, whatever that day one is, it could be from the time you start your business, it could be the day you decide to help improve your business process, it could be the day after the audit as well. Really, when you have determined to see that there are certain rooms for improvement and you're willing to agree and help yourself make those subtle changes to accommodate the new processes that would help you towards being more efficient and being ready for audit from day one. One of the guidelines, of course, is if you can come up with a simple document for each firm which outlines a certain procedural, I would say, formatted or unformatted schedule of things that you do in your firm. What are those things that you do every day? You intake a client. That's a step. You accept their driver's license, some form of an identification. It's actually a law society requirement. That's another checkpoint. You readily have either an engagement or retainer letter. That's a checkpoint. Do you have that? If you don't, can you get one? Can you ask a colleague? Can you Google it? Use practice management software such as uLaw to see if they can help with templates that are readily available. Can you tweak it? If you currently have retainer agreements, what's not making it more effective? So can you change that? So write down, especially in this time period where there's a little bit of a downtime, you have the time now to help review these cases. What kind of systems do you have that can help generate all of those financial documents? Are you doing this manually? Do you have a bookkeeper who can help you with that? Do you have a system that does that for you? Do you have full control over that system so that even if the system does give you that information, you very much know what's happening? Likewise with the bookkeeper or accountant. One is to actually be getting help, and the other is to be dependent. So you don't want to be completely dependent on someone or a system. You want to know what's actually happening, but just getting the help to get it done. Reviewing the financial statements. So if you looked at your previous ledgers and journals, how close is it to what the Law Society expects it to be? Does the journal actually have the method of payment, the date received, all those data components that are required? Reviewing that on a regular basis. Another important checklist that we want you to get comfortable with is on at least a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, reviewing your financial bank statements. So today you have online banking. That's a big boon for the 21st century law professional. So you can actually, at your comfort of your home, log into your bank statement and review weekly transactions. It makes it easier for you to reconcile your weekly transactions rather than wait for it to accumulate at the end of the month. Right? So being totally aware of what those are. Your monthly financial checklist. This is something that Law Society provides. So actually, at the end of today's webinar, I'll share a few links that we highly encourage you to review, download, print it, or just view it on your electronic device. There are many guidelines that are provided by the law societies of these different provinces that are very informative and pretty much tell you what to expect out of these audits. And they talk about these checklists. The Law Society expects you to produce a monthly reconciliation statement. Right? It does not say quarterly, does not say one statement for the whole year. They're very particular. They've already said that to you once a month. I need a document that does the reconciliation for that month. Now you have, of course, the right tools to choose that can help you do daily, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. At the end of the month, there's a document to be produced. How you play with your time in between these 28, 30 days is left to you. There's a lot of emphasis, especially as the electronic media has really taken over electronic communication, about how best you review your practice management checklist, especially around client communication. How do you communicate with your client today? Have you had that documented, and have you set the expectation with your client? Today we have clients and law firms using WhatsApp and other types of immediate SMSs, short media services that help you communicate faster. Was that accounted for? Was that explained to be a part of that retainer agreement? Because if you wrote something on WhatsApp and it did not really fly well with the client, of course, you want to ensure that you have all your grounds covered. Are you taking time like today, which is great for you to show up at these CPD sessions? We conduct them at least once a month, if not a few times. There are other institutions. You could be part of certain law society associations that may be providing you with other CPD opportunities. How best can you plan your week to be part of these sessions to make that learning process more organic? And of course, we have defined certain, and the Law Society, of course, has defined certain yearly practices that go to your financial management checklist. Of course, you have your tax documents that you have to prepare, your P&L, your revenue statements, right, your balance sheet. As much as it's not really a part of that core Law Society audit, we wanted to include that because it may be something that you want to think about as you pretty much plan for these audits. Because that actually helps in a different level of audit, which is to CRA. Let me go through this real quick. This is just an example or a sample, if you will, of certain questions that we want you to think about so that you can prepare that audit readiness document for your firm. So as part of the practice management checklist, things to consider is the client service and communication. What is your note-taking process? Do you take that note in a docket, in a system? Do you write it down into a paper? Do you type it into an Excel sheet? Because tomorrow if someone were to ask you, why are you charging me this $300, you want to be able to quickly tell them what it is. How best do you handle your retainer? Do you deposit the retainer check the same day, or do you take the complete 24 hours that's been given to you before you deposit it? Because that also reflects in how best you reconcile. Right? What is your process to handle conflicts? What is your process to deal with complaints? Now, that's something that we often talk about in our webinars as well, is always be prepared for the unknown. We've actually had a lot of law firms and clients, even during the COVID situation, looking for refunds and things of that nature, non-engagements. There are many different things that happens. Life puts many different hurdles in our way. So how do you manage and handle that professionally, and what is your process and documentation to deal with complaints, for example? And leading up to even a non-engagement letter. So when such a non-engagement does happen, do you have a plan of action of how best to make that transition smooth? Whether it's the client non-engaging you, or whether it's yourself non-engaging the client, for whatever reason that may be. Okay? Ghost client being one of those very simple examples. Someone came into your office, gave you a lot of information, and pretty much disappeared without retaining you. Then it's important that you as a legal firm take the right step to send out a non-engagement letter to that correspondence address or whatever information you have that client, relieving you of any responsibility towards representing that client. We spoke about this briefly. As part of the audit, believe it or not, you're being asked, how do you manage your files? What is the file naming processes? How best do you ensure that you're able to access a file when needed? Because this all goes back to how best you represent this society of the law society as a very good citizen of the society. Because you don't want a citizen who worked with you to say, I worked with this lawyer or this legal firm and they just were not able to give me the information I needed. In today's day and context where social media and review management system is key, and getting clients is a lot of word of mouth and referral based, this helps proactively measure what's happening around that. Are you able to access information and provide them right away? Are the responsibilities well documented? How do you best close out a matter? This is another important thing. You may do all the right things, get all the financial transactions in, but it's important to have a logical closure, not only for yourself, also for the client, to say that this particular matter is done. And thank you for your business. Look forward to your referral or you engaging me the next time for a totally different thing, right? So that's part of that closure package, if you will. So what kind of a process do you have for that closure package? Do you include your statement of activities, your bill of costs, or do you just wrap all of that in a settlement statement? And of course, this certainly is available. As I said, it's being recorded, and you certainly would be able to pause at any given time to read this through. The intention is not to kind of take a chalkboard and walk you through each and every point and read through that. It's really to give you, as I've mentioned, excerpts or samples of questions that you want to ask yourself. And all of this might just come under one paragraph written in an engagement letter, to be quite honest. And it's just, as long as you can bring that into a process, not only for yourself to deliver, but also for others in your business, your colleagues, your assistants, your coworkers who can help you maintain that same level of discipline. That's very important. We've spoken enough about the financial management checklist. I'm probably going to pause real quick. especially around retainers, you really want to make sure that everyone in your firm, including yourself, is well trained on the policies and expectations of retainer management, right? So for example, if you've got a cash retainer, ensuring that everybody knows the responsibility of depositing that money, right, within 24 hours into your trust account. If you've got the money, you've got to deposit it within 24 hours. If you haven't, that's going to reflect in your ledger, right? Because the day of the receipt and the day of deposit needs to be validated. Where are you paying your disbursements? That's the next big subject within all legal firms. Everyone's now starting to slowly think about, why not I just use the trust account? I'm not looking to make money out of disbursements. I just want to make sure that I don't have to pay for it and wait, in line for the client to pay me. Of course, in certain areas of practice, certain matters, the law firm may actually have to pay for it, and then, of course, take that money out of the retainer, or may actually have to wait for the payment. But if given a chance, if you can, based on your expertise in a certain area of practice, can you use the trust account to manage disbursements? In which case, do you have trust checks? That's the next practical question. If not, you probably want to go order some. Do you send invoices as well as receipts? It was audited to find a lot of firms didn't necessarily send out receipts in time. From a very recent survey that was taken. So invoices are being sent out, but payments made, especially if it's made through credit cards or other means, it's important that you as a legal firm, across your firm, have a process and a policy to send out these receipts. Okay. So a very high-level snapshot from a financial management checklist, if you can contain the best policies and the procedures within these 4 topics, you've done very well to cover a significant part of that financial management checklist. One is definitely generating the invoices on time as per the agreed retainer letter or engagement letter, right? Which includes the dockets, disbursements, and the charges across multiple lawyers or legal professionals who have worked on that matter. Ensuring that you have a process to manage your invoice balances, who has paid you, what's the day on sale, do you have eligible trust transfers that you review on a daily basis. That is something that you review on a daily basis, because that's money sitting on the table to be made. Also, the sooner each transaction is captured into your bookkeeping system, as soon as it happens in real life, the better it is for your reconciliation. The third, determining where the money is going into and the money is coming out of. If it's going into a trust account, making sure that the appropriate monies are routed in the right channel towards the trust account. You can't take trust money and put it into your general account. You want to be very particular about putting it into the right account. If you're withdrawing money, making sure that it's going into the right general account that you're dealing with. If you're paying for bank fees, ensuring that you've done the due diligence to speak to your bank to make sure that they're withdrawing the bank fees from your general account. If you're paying a credit card company, it's bank fees or it's credit card processing fees, ensuring that that money is taken out of your general account, leaving your trust account untouched. All these little things add up to save you the time and effort and really the headache of not having to deal with it on the day of the audit. And we spoke about this briefly. From a client perspective, you always want to think about why would they come back to me on certain things. As I mentioned, complaints, concerns, clarifications, and of course, documentation on payments, receipts, and a logical closure to a particular file. This is what they're going to come back with, making sure that you have the right documentation to answer each of these questions again, you're preparing yourself to be audit ready from day one. We spoke about this briefly, but from a technology standpoint, the two top questions: backup, security. Making sure that you're never at a state where you have lost data, because that's very hard. Then you have to recreate that data, and that's a mess. So making sure at all times, understanding what the backup policy of a provider is, or what your internal policies are if you're doing this yourself. Indicating risks of any technology being used, and that's predominantly done with a retainer letter or an engagement letter. Whether you're using email, email is the biggest risk if you look at it really more than cloud, because email has been in the cloud for a very long time, even before cloud software came about. But it's become really stable state today, and no one really worries about it. But a lot of hacking and things of that nature happens with an email servers. We use banks today for all of our financial transactions. Everything is electronic. These are encrypted, but I'm sure you've heard several years back, major banks got hacked, data got compromised. So there are risks and rewards of using technology, but depending on to what extent you use technology, you want to appraise your client of how best you use it, the benefits and the risks. Okay? Okay, with so much to do, and this is really the final wrapper, with so much to do and so many things to keep in mind that needs to be done, especially one thing that we talk about often is recording transactions as and when they happen. This continues to be the biggest topic for any legal practitioner, because the practitioner has so many different obligations, responsibilities, many things that are running in their head. How to best manage and promote the business. How to ensure that you're doing a kick-ass job when you're representing a client. Making sure you're educating yourself about the latest laws, policies, and procedures. On top of that, how do you best represent the law society? How do you manage your practice? How do you pay your bills? Right? So there's just a lot of things, and we get it. And that's why you need the right process, procedure, people, and or tools. It's not just the tools that's important. It's the appropriate training to use that tool is equally important. Because the tool by itself is not going to help you solve the problem. The tool is going to help relieve by doing a few automations as long as you provided the right data. So data in, data out. So training yourself, training your employees, training your staff to be familiar with a certain tool, whatever tool that may be, to maximize the use and the benefit of that tool is a very important step. Right? Just buying an Excel sheet and Microsoft Word is not going to help. You really need to learn how to use it and put it to use. So practice management tools such as uLaw or legal accounting software such as uLaw, and there are many other tools, allow you to capture events as and when they happen, because they give you the right screens to either enter it right from your phone or from a laptop or any internet-connected device. So when it happens, you're able to record it. If not, it's being recorded in the bank. These tools provide you with little tricks of the trade, can allow you to import the bank statement at the end of the day, so you don't even have to enter this data. You can just import them right into the system, once again, reducing time, but you still have to do it. You still need to reconcile your accounts. You still need to enter these records as and when they happen, or use the right tools to import these records as and when they happen. And that's what's going to lead to keeping the record keeping between your bookkeeping system and your financial bank statement as close as they possibly can. That will allow you to reconcile at the end of the month easily, right? And if compliance is built right into those major 4 categories we spoke about, your practice management, your financial management, technology review, these are the important things that a software or a practice management legal accounting can do. Professional guidelines, time management, of course. Time management is something the practice management can help you with so that you're not spending the 2 to 3 hours or 4 hours a day to do this manually. You're just spending less than 15 to 20 minutes tops a day to enter this data, or maybe spending a slightly prolonged time over the weekend to catch up with that data. Right? So we really advocate that the maximum you push is that weekend. In that week, we kindly request you to rethink with the right tools today that give you the opportunity to catch up on a weekly basis. You don't have to wait till the end of the month. Spend that 1 hour on a weekly basis so that you can be completely relieved of any last-minute surprises during a monthly reconciliation, because that's where everything begins. Once a monthly reconciliation is completed, the ledgers and journals are just a byproduct and a click of a button report. That's just a reflection of the reconciliation. Okay? Once you have those core aspects that everyone fears about the reconciliation and the financial bookkeeping aspect of it, you can always work your way up to ensure that you have the right retainer agreement written. You can always work your way up to ensure that you have the right technology review done, because you're cloud-based, you've done your due diligence, you know uLaw backs up 99.99%. You can put that in your retainer agreement. You use email and mobile phones to communicate. You can put that. So all that's something that you work yourself up towards. But the core that everyone is always fearful of is not recording the transactions in time, and hence not able to show up the facts at the time of reconciliation. And if you've not reconciled for a prolonged time, and if your audit is next week, that's when you're scampering, and that's when you're bound to make a few mistakes. Beyond this comes the capability to provide you data. We ran a webinar last week that really talks about data management. It's very important that you as a business owner have full control over your data. If your trust ledger tells you that you have about $80,000 in your client's trust balance, then you really need to know that number closely on a regular basis. If your P&L says that you've just made a profit of about $3,000, then you need to be very close to that number, not be dependent on a third-party product individual to tell you that. You should know it, and you should just hopefully use the software or the individual to help you achieve that. Right? With or without them, you should know that $3,000 is the profit. So the analytics and ease of use, all of that is a byproduct of being ready for audit from day one by ensuring that you record the transactions as when they happen. That's really the building blocks, the foundation of being ready. And this was the particular slide share that I wanted to talk about. You actually have a lot of reference online that gives you everything that I've spoken about the past 55 minutes, outlining the expectations from the law societies. I have listed the Law Society of Ontario, but all the provinces across Canada have a very similar documentation. And of course, each province would have its little subtle difference based on the jurisdiction. Like the Form 9A, there are other documents like 9B, 9C that are different in different provinces. So depending on where you are today, you can of course look at those different documents for your province. It's as simple as Googling them. Let me see if I may have already Googled them for you. So if you can see my screen, and hopefully you do, I had just Googled LSUC spot audit, you could actually, you could say LSO, which is really what it is, the LSO bookkeeping guidelines. And there it is. This is actually a full-fledged document that pretty much talks about how you manage these, what is expected, what are the templates being expected for the documents, right? So it's really starting with, why do you even do this to begin with? Okay, so we kindly request you to give this a glance, give this a read. And we've actually delivered a much condensed version of this particular documentation in one of our webinars called Everything Practice Management. It's available in our YouTube channel. It's about an hour, and it's in fact a CPD credit of professionalism credits for 1.5 hours in Ontario, 1 hour in British Columbia, 1 hour in New Brunswick. Okay, so there you go. What's your 9A samples of them, right? You have all of that information readily available. So what is the name of the financial institution, account number? And that's exactly what we do, or any legal accounting software will help you do, is generate that Form 9A when needed in a certain template that is expected out of you. So if I were to go into compliance, and here's a Form 9A, even if you missed to generate it as and when you created that, you can always go back in time and generate that Form 9A on demand. So again, practice management tools and legal accounting software such as uLaw, in a way, has your back. As long as you can be truthful and prudent about the data, the system certainly loves you, and it's not waiting to catch you on the wrong foot, really. It's really looking to help you provide the right information. But as always I say, data in, data out. If the data that you've provided is bad, no matter what wonderful system you use, what you're going to get out is just a reflection of what you put in. Same documentation as expected by the law societies, right? This is expected that you sign on this. And if you've done your reconciliation, if let's say on a particular week, you come in and you are willing to spend that 5 minutes. You say, all right, as of this week, there's just 2 transactions that I have not reconciled. I actually had a retainer come in for Mr. Gonzalez for $576, and I see that on the very same day, I had withdrawn that money. This is where you open your TD, RBC, CIBC bank statement. You can even change. Let's say it was not the 20th. Sometimes the bank may reflect on a different date. You can go ahead and enter that specific date. Maybe it was not the 20th, it was the 23rd. You can change that, and you can make sure that it's something that you've dealt with. And the Law Society expects a monthly reconciliation document which has all the documents. For yourself, you can actually go ahead and just do a preview, validating and capturing that those transactions have been validated and have been dealt with. So the next time you come into the reconciliation, you pretty much know that you've dealt with these 2 transactions. So the only transactions you're going to have to deal with afresh is the ones in black which have not been dealt with. So the blue lines in uLaw indicate the ones that you've dealt with. Likewise, each and every product, each and every process can be different. Again, enabling you to save time, but more importantly, capture the moment as and when it happens. Not wait till the end of the month to reconcile 85 transactions. Do the 20 transactions for every week, and maybe just deal with the 20 transactions for the last week that you're not dealt with. Okay? And once you've reconciled, generating the financial compliance documents, as I mentioned, is a breeze. And as long as you've actually got once you've got this in place, as I said, you work backward towards the compliance that we provide in other aspects of your checklist. So let's say you want to look at the matter checklist. Let me close out of here, move into my matters for files. And here's, again, this can be, as I mentioned, as long as you've docketed it in time, you've generated the return agreement in time, generating the documents needed for audit does not have to be something you do work towards. It's readily available if you've done all the right things. Generating a client identity verification, if a template is expected, it's readily available. But capturing the data for Mr. John Doe and having all the pertinent information readily available, that's a must. That's a process. That's the discipline that we're talking about. So someone has done a fantastic job of entering as much as information as they possibly can right from the get-go to give you this holistic document. So checking off driver's license and having a scanned driver's license, that's the next step. Having the data first, that's important. Okay? So I certainly want to be respectful of your time. It's about 3:01 at this particular time. So let me wrap up today's webinar. Again, the topic is Get Ready for Your Law Society Audit. It's available for 1 hour of professionalism credits in the provinces of Ontario, British Columbia, and New Brunswick. You definitely should be able to log into your portal and get these particular 1 hour credits into your portfolio. We welcome you to send us any other topics that you would like for us to cover as we send this information back to Law Society to get their approval to make them CPD ready. Or if they're not, we run them as fun sessions where we can share with you what we're doing and hoping that this was a engaging experience. And as part of today's webinar, of course, we want to highlight the need for you to be always prepared and be audit ready from day one by understanding that the audit was not meant to do any fear-mongering, was really meant to be a proactive step to help you down the right path. And knowing what to expect, if you can do the due diligence and have the right discipline in place, you can be audit ready right from day one. So with that, let me wrap up today's webinar. I thank everyone for joining me. We hope that as the summer extends that we're able to be human again